for coming. Thanks for the sponsors for making this happen, and thanks for the panelists for joining today. I'm Gary Post. I'm with Andina Family Offices, and what I do is I do private equity and venture capital investing on behalf of 9 families, primarily based in Utah. We also invest directly in real estate, and you might call us alternative junkies. About 70% of our portfolio today is in alternatives, and nearly 50% of that is divided in private equity and real estate. You have to turn it on. Well, that's a technical matter.
They are now.
In the real estate sector, we favor cash flow multifamily. We're also involved in developing senior housing. On the private equity side, we do everything from Series A up through recaps, growth capital, and we can and will support an activist in the public markets. So we're willing to listen to anything that I can pronounce, so that unfortunately leaves out biotech. As a backdrop for this panel today, I want to make a couple comments on the growth of private equity investing at family offices, which, by the way, is not new. I mean, the most consistent investors from the venture side were the Rockefeller family and other people like them. But since the Great Recession in the 2007-8 time frame, a lot of families became annoyed with the idea they didn't really get to see what they invested in. They didn't really mind funds, but they want to have really more control. And also a tremendous amount of wealth was created by additional entrepreneurs. So what's happened is the growth of family office investing with specialists on staff who can do that. I've heard from recent studies that almost 70% of families have invested directly into private equity. So since family office investors have become more important, we thought to give a little snapshot from some people who are actually doing it every day. And I'd like to start by having a show of hands on the panel of some of the things that they do. So the first question is, and indicate by raising hands, is how many invest in directly in private real estate? That's everybody, okay. And how about private equity? That's everybody too. How many of you have a website that will explain what you're looking for? So that's one thought, is finding what people want sometimes can be a little bit more difficult. How many will work with independent sponsors or developers, whether that's real estate or private equity? Pretty much everybody. Okay, very good. And do you require, let's say on the private equity side, do you require majority control? How many require majority control, or how many would look at requiring majority control?
For the most part.
And the others will look at both? Okay, excellent, excellent. I'd like to actually have the panelists now introduce themselves, including what kind of entity they're with and what are the objectives of those entities at this time and their roles inside of the company. Let's start here.
My name is Brian Meihaus. I work for the Horowitz Group. And the Horowitz Group, we have our roots in the ready-mix concrete business. The founders operated a ready-mix concrete business in Orange County and the Inland Empire. Went by the name of Standard Concrete. That business was sold in 1990, and since that time have been professional investors. There's really 3 baskets of asset classes, I'll call them, that the family likes to invest in. First is direct real estate. For a lot of reasons that Gary mentioned, we like to have direct line of sight and understand operationally what's happening with that real estate. So we find that to be a very attractive asset class. Asset classes within real estate, retail, medical office, we do land. We have a multifamily portfolio as well up in the Pacific Northwest. In terms of geography, we really don't have any focus other than perhaps West Coast, where we can get to it in a fairly short time. So that's sort of basket 1. Basket 2 is direct private equity investing, both on a majority and a minority basis. Because the family has a proclivity for real estate, we've had a fair amount of success in multi-unit retail. So, or people like to say chain restaurants, let's say that. So we've had some success there, but certainly not only focused in that sector. And the third bucket is more indirect investing, where we'll invest alongside sponsors, partners, funds, alternative investors, and that sort of thing. My focus, I'll finish with this, is more the real estate side. So basket one and a little bit of the indirect investing in real estate.
I'm Randy Winograd. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Neems Capital. Neems Capital is the alternative investment arm of the Nazarian Family Office. This isn't working, and I have a loud voice. Of the Nazarian Family Office. Our family office was founded to diversify the wealth that the family essentially had from being an A-round investor in Qualcomm. David Nazarian leads Neems Capital, and the focus of our private equity investing, of our alternative investing, is direct control investments in real estate, primarily multifamily and student housing, and those primarily are what we would call value-add B product, and mainly located, just because we found the opportunities, Texas, Oklahoma, Florida, Georgia. We have some holdings in Northern California. Our real estate office is actually headquartered in Austin, Texas. On the private equity side of things, our current strategy is to do direct control investments in operating companies. We will do minority investments from a diversification standpoint that are with other families or maybe an independent sponsor, where we will put a lot less money in and seek a lot less control for diversification, particularly if it's in an industry where we might have background but not in-house expertise, as Gary, as you mentioned. We have in-house expertise mainly in the hospitality, restaurant space, so a lot of the direct control deals that we've done are in those spaces, but we've also invested as a more passive investor in high-tech, manufacturing, and some various other industries.
Robert?
Hi everybody, Robert Terrell, Karlin Asset Management. We're a single family office based out here in Los Angeles. AUM is about $1.8 billion. The portfolio is managed through a mix of what I would call internal and external investment strategies. Internal teams, of which we have 4 right now: distressed real estate in the US and Europe, real estate direct lending, long-only public equities, and venture capital. Those are internal teams managing money in direct investments. External managers, private equity, hedge fund, long-only, and the pretty simple approach is for us to go out and find best returns possible. Our principal's given us a pretty simple mandate. It's to grow his capital so we can give it away, and that's what we try to do.
Yeah, my name is Ben Durrant. I spent the last several years as the CIO for the Strand Partners, which is the family office for Bill Powers, who's an ex-PIMCO executive. And then about 6 weeks ago, I went off on my own and started my own firm called Provenio Capital with a partner, where we're going to be acting as an investment office to wealthy families and private foundations. I think this panel is probably more relevant to the experience I had as CIO of a single family office, so I'll talk to that a little bit first. We invested across all asset classes, hedge funds, private equity, venture, traditional investments. We did quite a bit in private deals, both directly and through managers and co-invest opportunities. In private equity and venture, we were also, Bill was a general partner with a real estate group called Encore Funds, and with JLK here in LA. In my current business, we're going to be doing much of the same stuff, focusing on direct and private deals, private equity, venture, and alternatives specifically.
Hey, thanks very much. Sticking with Ben and loudening up my voice, what are you looking for today? What's at the top of your shopping list that's the thing you'd really like to have land on your lap this afternoon?
What would I really like
in
to
terms
land
of
on my lap?
deals and real estate?
I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to take that hospital pass. No. From our perspective, what we're looking for is idiosyncratic deal flow. We're not fans of the public markets right now, neither fixed income nor equities. I'm sure that's not going to be a revelation to anyone in the room. And so we're always looking to access idiosyncratic deal flow, and that comes both through our managers and through relationships that we've developed in the family office network. Guys like I'm sitting with on the panel here, and across the country, it's a very powerful network for sourcing and developing idea flow. Real estate, as well, you've got to be really selective and work with people that know what they're doing. I would say that's the case in most asset classes these days. You know, staying away from anything that's early stage and especially pre-revenue. But we think that there's still a pretty good illiquidity premium out there right now, and so definitely staying in the private markets.
Robert?
Glad Ben went first because it gave me time to think about my answer to this, which is still not going to be very good. So the truth is that there's not a lot on the list right now, and so then what do we do? And you know, how can I give you guys something that's helpful going forward? So why isn't there a lot on the list? Because assets are expensive, right? And whether we want to blame the Fed or we want to say something else is responsible, there are not a lot of really cheap things out there for an opportunistic family office like us to buy. So what do we do in the meantime? We prepare, right? We get ready for those times when we can go into markets and we can act as a liquidity provider. And so how do we prepare? We start the search for A, smart people that we trust, and B, asset classes that if a price is presented to us, we would be happy to own it at a price that we think is reasonable. And you know, does that mean I was telling Ben earlier, are we preparing for the next distress cycle? That's certainly something we're considering. But you know, if you told me to put my finger on something and say, hey, we are buying this right now, everything we can, I don't have much now.
Randy?
Well, you asked a hypothetical question, so I'll give a hypothetical answer. I'd love a 300-unit apartment building on the west side that trades at an 8 cap, but since that isn't going to happen, I think that echoing a lot of what these guys have said, A, we're doing something that a lot of family offices, when you say the words to them, they kind of shudder. Why would you do that? We're contemplating selling. That's a nice way to make returns. If you bought and the market is frothy, we're contemplating selling. We haven't actually sold anything yet, but we're actually looking into it for the first time. The other thing we're doing is we're looking at either deal flow that's coming from relationships, because even in non-frothy cycles, we are not going to be the highest bidder, but we will perform when we say we're going to perform. And so we're looking more for what I would call strategic opportunities. So properties that are owned, properties adjacent to something that we already own, that could be a strategic long-term play that could benefit from efficiencies of what we already own. And just usual opportunities that come from relationships, but even those are impacted by the frothiness. So really more strategic things where we can afford to pay because it makes sense for us for reasons it doesn't make sense to others.
So the current low caps on real estate, high priced EBITDA, and private equity has been a deterrent?
Yeah, although we actually bought we bought a private equity deal in December. It was a banked process. It was out there for everybody. We weren't the highest bidder, and like I said, we're never going to be. But I think that we will do deals where we think we can create, in any cycle, only where we think we can create value through our expertise in-house, our skill set, not just because we bought right and we've got great financing and high leverage. That's just not our business model. So I think we're just pursuing those same strategies. It's just harder because other people are doing stupid things, and so you might not be able to get the stuff that would make sense for you. So.
And Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I like the word preparation actually that Robert used. We use a term in the office, pay it forward. So we're doing a lot of, we'll take any and all meetings today, but we're very cautious on actually deploying capital. So, but we'll take the meeting, we'll provide feedback, because I think a lot of the way that deals are structured today and the yields that are going to be driven by these deals are they don't fit our parameters in terms of the risk-adjusted return. So we're doing a lot of preparation ourselves, and we take the meetings, but we're not doing a lot of investing. What I'll say though is we're doing a lot of asset management of existing assets. So to give an example, if you take a grocery-anchored retail center and you wanted to go buy a similar grocery-anchored retail center for, I don't pick a number, $40 million. This would be a nice retail center here in Southern California. If you had a similarly located or similarly performing asset, and you were to invest, say, $10 million into an asset you already control, and you were able to generate a 10% yield incremental on your NOI or value, versus deploying that $40 million, or pick a number, $10, $40 million into a new asset where you're going to get 6%. That's the kind of rationale that we're playing with in our heads, is in terms of deploying of capital. We'd rather put that money into an asset we already control, and whether it's a facelift, whether it's buying a new deal for a tenant improvements or leasing commissions, or a restructuring of a lifestyle amenity within the center. Those are the sort of things that we're thinking about in terms of deployment of capital. So we're not, we may not be looking at new deals that are being brought to us, but we are deploying capital in assets that we already control.
Just one other point to make. I think that the market is moving from a seller's market to a buyer's market now. What we're finding is the ability to negotiate terms especially on private deals, is becoming more attractive from our perspective. Valuations are coming down. The terms that you can get, whether it's liquidation preferences, participation, dividends, we're finding that you're able to negotiate those because the competition for capital, I think, is getting more and more difficult.
You're talking about real estate though, or private equity?
I'm talking about private equity deals, yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing the same in private equity. We're actually holding on to cash for the moment. We're looking to pick up secondaries, both in private equity deals and funds and in venture situations. So for right now, we're just watching and ready to act swiftly when opportunities come up. A lot of people here today are part of an overall network of deal flow and ideas. Can you please tell us how you like to receive information about new ideas? Let's, Brian, is
Sure.
it okay to send you a text at 10 o'clock at night, for example? Hey, I got this phenomenal deal, signed Gary.
I'm always on the clock, so sure, but text message is probably not the easiest way to communicate. I think you'll find a similar answer from my panelists, but I'll throw this out. The idea of a relationship and a first or second degree connection is the first thing that we look for. Have we invested in deals whereby we don't know the sponsor or the manager up front, and we've gotten to know them, of course. But first thing in terms of a tip is find a way to that family through a pre-existing relationship. That'd be sort of the first thing. I think the other thing is get to know the family office and maybe the personality. You heard the diversity of the types of things we're all investing in. Because our family came from an operating company background, we tend to lean towards investments, whether it's a real estate investment where we'll self-manage and asset manage ourselves because we can turn the screws and we are operators, or a private equity deal where we'll take board seats and we'll actually, in some of our examples, we'll help put the menu together and we'll help the throughput of customers coming into one of our multi-unit retail properties. So I'll leave it at that. Get to know the family office and the personalities within the office, and those are ways perhaps to get somebody's attention.
I'll add to that just because Brian and I were talking about this a little earlier, so thank you for leaving me a little material. In addition to the importance of getting to know the personalities, because a lot of family offices are very sensitive about who they do business with, and so there's that side of it. Who are we doing business with? That's very important. The other importance is, like all of you, we don't have a lot of time, and so if you can help us by getting to know what we want before you start peppering us with deals, that helps immensely, because we are focused on this. Everybody here, I think, has somewhat of an investment mandate or a box that we're focused on, and we see hundreds of deals that are inside that box, and we only do one or two of them. So you got a lot greater chance of having success and us viewing whoever's reaching out to us as giving us value if you're able to first invest the time to figure out whether what you're sending us fits within that box, because a great way to turn somebody off is just to send something unsolicited that just doesn't fit with their mandate, particularly if you don't know them. And then the other thing I would say is when we say no, and the one thing I always try to do is right off the bat, I mean, I can get an email from somebody, if they give me a quick description of what it is, say, does this fit? Is there a chance at all? I know the worst thing is slow playing somebody. So you'll get a quick no if it's not inside our box. So respect the quick no and don't push back again, because if I give you the courtesy of taking time away from whatever else I'm doing to look at it, think about it, and say I'm interested or not, and then I get pushback, I might not open your next email, particularly if we don't have a relationship. So
And he mentioned the word time a couple of times there, and so I want to piggyback off of that. And I debate telling a lot of these statistics because they sound sort of arrogant and maybe self-important, but I think they're helpful. So this is with the idea of trying to help everybody. I think in a typical day, I end up with 20 voicemails that take, on average, 40 minutes to try to listen to, right? And that's in addition to emails and everything that come in and require responses. And I say that not to, again, say that like, oh, I'm so cool because I get all these phone calls, but more that you, all of you, as you reach out, can internalize that like, hey, I am one of many people that are reaching out to this person. How can I, whether it's figure out how my opportunity fits in with what they're doing, or why me or my opportunity are so unique that they should really pay attention. And anything you can give, preferably an email, to help sort of articulate that, it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference for you in getting the quick no and saving time, hopefully on your side, but also on our side as we try to triage where to spend our time.
Yeah, I like Rob's initial reaction to me, which was Snapchat.
I did not say that.
Sorry, mate, threw you under the bus there.
I didn't say that.
So, no, I would echo everything that these guys said. For me, it's pretty black and white, which is, especially on the private deal side and on the real estate side, unless it's coming through our network and people we know, there's zero chance we're doing anything, literally zero. It's a little different on the hedge fund side. Like on the hedge fund side, we get guys coming to us all the time with new funds, and I want to meet all the funds out there. We, similar to Brian, we have an open door policy with that. But on the private deal and real estate side, it's got to come through the network, and it's got to be someone I know. And and that's probably.
Yeah, we prefer obviously hearing from people we've met, but we try to meet as many people as possible throughout the year so that we do have that network and we've had a chance to talk for maybe 15 minutes at a conference and get to know each other a bit in terms of preferences and what they work on, what we work on. Trying to set up a phone call with me can be really tough, and you might lose a week for me to look at your idea, which we want ideas, we have capital to deploy. So the best way, at least from, I know my real estate colleagues are the same way at Andina, is we'd like to see a summary, but we don't care if you send the whole PowerPoint too. I can see it on a plane, I can see it early in the morning. If there's a chance that I can respond quickly, I will, but that helps me help you really kind of move the thing along. And text messages are not particularly helpful unless you're telling me you're 15 minutes late for breakfast, in which case that's all fine.
Gary, can I add just one thing that
Sure.
struck me? One example of an intermediary that I believe was successful in getting my attention, sort of just give you an example of what was attractive to me in terms of interacting with this intermediary. I met a month ago. It was maybe a second degree connection. I took a 30-minute coffee with him, and so that was an investment of my time, but also an investment of his time. And after that initial meeting, he happened to have a whole bunch of things. He looks nationally, he's really brokering sponsored deals nationally in all asset classes within real estate, so office, multifamily, retail, et cetera. And he sent me an email after that, and put a tremendous amount of time into this email of outlining the 10 or 15 deals that he had in front of him, whether it was from a meeting he just had from an investor or a sponsor. And I was able to respond via email, and I invested some time to him and gave him a response. I kind of, like in a legal document, I redlined his document, said no, yes, here's why, here's feedback. And then the next email he sent me was sort of 3, right? That maybe, and so we very quickly, I didn't know him a month ago, and I've probably seen 4 or 5 deals, and he's been very thoughtful about what he's presenting to me because I was able to give him some feedback. So the lesson, I suppose, is email is productive. I'm hearing that as a consistent theme.
So something to throw to my fellow panelists, NDAs. So you get the email that comes in and says, I've got the world's greatest property in the Midwestern United States. You have to sign an NDA to go further.
No. And I'm a lawyer, so I could read it and mark it up in 3 seconds. No. There's enough non-confidential information you can tell me in 2 sentences to figure out whether I want to take the time to read an NDA. No.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. There's some things in legacy items in NDAs, like They're just really flaws, like, you're gonna destroy all the information. Yeah, I'm gonna like know on every server in the world that document got to, and I'm gonna be able to destroy it? No, I'm not gonna be able to destroy it. So I've started to come up with my own, like, 2-sentence NDA that this is our version. It says, hey, we get it, you're cool, we'll keep it quiet, no problem, signed Gary. And so
No, joking aside, we actually do have our own NDA, and it's actually easier if you do it that way because they almost never say no, and you just
Yeah.
produce your own and have whatever terms you want on it, make it reasonable, and they'll
But are
almost
you-
always say
If
yes.
somebody says, before I give you the
No,
idea.
of course
then-
not.
no,
That's
you need
ridiculous.
something. You need-
That's absurd.
Yeah, it
Where's-
is absurd, and I think that's a big stickler point, and thanks for bringing that up. It can slow things down by like 2 weeks versus getting something the next day and reacting to it, and then, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna mark up a document and not.
Yeah,
so
let's be
I'm
clear about
shocked.
something, not a marketing tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an anti. Yeah, exactly.
NDA stands for no deal acceptance?
No deal.
Good.
So, Ben, I've been dying to ask this of you all week.
You've already asked me what I want to land in my lap. I dread
Yes,
it.
what do you want to learn? No, are family office investors kinder and gentler?
Really? I
Okay,
have
the
no
scenario,
idea how to
the
respond to
scenario I
that.
heard is, well,
Kinder
we
and
don't want to.
gentler.
The scenario is, a banker calls up and says that his client would like to avoid venture capital and private equity firms, and they'd like to have family office investors. Well, what are they thinking, and do you think you or anyone on the panel provides a better set of psychological qualities to
I can safely say I did not understand the question.
Why don't we ask them people who invest with family offices, what they think about
Yeah,
investing?
I don't know, yeah,
I get that all the time, and I interpret that as you have stupid dumb money.
yeah. But
I think it means more patient capital from family office investors.
That's a good point. I think if you ask her what kind of value does a family office investor bring, and sometimes it's a much longer holding
Right.
period, and we're under no compulsion.
Oh,
to
okay, well, that's the, okay,
Yeah.
so I'll tell you a couple of things. The first is that if you get family office investors, number one, they can move quickly if they need to, okay, because they don't have to deal with the board and they don't have to deal with the decision process, as long as some of the really big ones are more institutional, but most of us guys, like, we can move pretty quickly or something if we need to. Not that we don't do the work, obviously, but like we can. I'd say the other thing is that what I do is if I find a really great deal, chances are, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to share it with some other guys I know, because I have a network of people that I share deal flow with, and that's a really important part of what I do. So I'd say those are two things that are benefits.
So we're not kinder and gentler, the pain just doesn't last as long, because we get it done quickly.
Well, the perception, when I hear it, is somebody's looking, they've talked to a private equity venture capital firm or professional real estate investors, and they got disappointing news on pricing, so they think they can go, or control, or covenants, whatever it would be, and they want somebody dumber. And so I don't think we fit that. So it's also a turnoff, immediate turnoff to me, is that I probably won't look any further, because it's probably I'm going to be dealing with an unrealistic principle on the other side.
Gary, I think the other thing, we have both family office and big institutional pension fund investors, and I think that family office investors are much more transparent in working, telling you not only quicker, but what's behind their answers. They're not saying an answer that just deflects, right? Like institutions will just say something like, it's not a good time, and really they just don't like whatever it is, instead of telling you what they don't like about it. So I just found much more transparency, which is helpful, because that feedback to get you the right deals back, like you were talking about. So I think that's another difference.
Yeah, good,
Well,
great point.
I tell you from my experience, you get into a deal as a family office and you treat it fairly and you understand what's going on. You can be their best friend. When you're not treated properly, it becomes very personal, and it's not a happy situation. So it works both ways.
Yeah, that's right. I want to echo the comment is if we're brought an idea that requires 3 times as much money that we can put in it, we'll say bring them to us. We'll do up to $20 million in equity. But if we think it's a good deal, we'll be calling other members on the panel, for example, and say, hey, let's look at this together, and maybe we should co-invest to get this done. So.
Can I just follow on the patient capital comment? So, for the panelists comment, do you view that your investment horizon is the same or different than traditional?
Well, I think we don't have an investment period and a term we don't have a fund, right? So there isn't a fund life that deals have to close by and you've got to deliver capital back. So yeah, I think from that perspective, clearly family offices are more patient capital. That would be my response to that. You guys, what other thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I was going to say something along the same lines. Is we, maybe we're a little bit different than Randy this way, but we don't have parameters on a lot of stuff like many institutional investors and private equity funds, which I would include in institutional investor category, that they've got to put money to work. They need to do it on some sort of meter because their clients want them to put money to work, right? Some part of it is having a good deal, but some part of it is putting money to work as expected. We don't have to do that, and if that means that we can do nothing for a while we wait for better returns, I mean, I think that defines a longer term perspective, is that you can do nothing for a while, but I don't know if that answers the question.
Structure. In theory, there are structural elements to a deal that are there because there's a timeline. So if you have this longer timeline that ultimately you guys put together.
You don't necessarily have a longer timeline. You have a timeline. You basically have to manage expectations, right? So one of the questions we're all going to ask in our due diligence process is going to be, when can I expect to have my capital back and be playing with the house money, right? So the time frame will be dictated by the deal, and that'll be part of the due diligence process. It's not like we don't have a fund term, so we're happy to sit around for 15 years waiting for the thing to, come to fruition.
The way I describe it to people is it can be more patient and it can be less patient.
Right.
Patient is the wrong adjective. The adjective is not adjective, but the description is we don't have arbitrary predetermined time horizons for every deal. We try to optimize the time horizons both for deploying and getting our capital back. So if that means, to Ben's point, we've looked at this investment, say it's a private equity deal, we talked to management, they think that we can do X, Y, Z in the next 5 years and that would be the optimal point to sell, that's great. Then we'll strive for that business plan, but the world changes. But the good news is we're more patient because if the world has changed in 5 years, then we're not forced to sell because we need to exit our fund because the fund is expiring or we've gone through all the extensions on the fund or we want to have a realization that might not be the most ideal time, but we're raising the next fund. So I would say that patience is the wrong word. I think we can usually, in our vehicles, we don't have predetermined time horizons, we have expectations. But our goal is to optimize for each investment once we make it, the exit. And part of that is timing.
And the one thing I would throw out on the timing side that can be different than a private equity fund is capital has an opportunity cost. So you bring a deal, you think this is the greatest deal in the world, and we all kind of agree up front that it probably takes 5 years to bring this to full fruition. Well, what happens in year 3 if the markets in Asia puke something up and all of a sudden that is the greatest opportunity any of us have seen in our working lives? You're probably going to start to hear from us that like, hey, we recognize that you're 75% of the way there, but 75% of the way might be good enough because we've got something else that is significantly better. And obviously those things get negotiated up front and that sort of thing too, but an institutional investor or private equity fund won't have that same sort of opportunity cost issue, right? It's just the money's being deployed, it's going to be there until it's monetized or the end of the fund life, and that's sort of it. It's just an area where I do think we're more flexible.
I mean, we have an investment that we underwrote to hold for a minimum of 8 years, real estate. Somebody made us an unsolicited offer last week. We've owned most of the portfolio for less than a year. We might take it because it's a crazy offer. So is that being patient? No, that's the opposite of patient. We told our investors, 8 years, but nobody's going to be disappointed if it turns out that it's not going to be 8 months. We need long-term capital gain, a year and a day. Nobody will be disappointed in that instance. We optimize the hold period, I think is the way, that's why I would try to describe it.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add, I agree with everything you guys have said, is it's hard to have a conversation about sort of patient, flexible capital without the operational control or the control. That's typically why you'll find most of us answer and raise our hands related to control investing, because we want the ability, as Randy said, if the market is ripe and there's an opportunity to monetize that investment, we want the opportunity to do that. And it may be a misalignment in terms of the promote structure or the fees that are generated by that sponsor. But that's why a lot of times what you'll find is there's a control element that I can speak for our family. That's typically what we want.
Well, here's one other last thing is there's a different decision tree in a family office than there is in a fund, right? In order to monetize an investment in a private equity fund, right, the committee has to meet and they've got to decide what they're doing, and that's back to the whole advantage of being a family office, which is at the end of the day, the family decides and they can say, hey, listen, we got a 2.5x sitting on this thing, let's try to get out of it, or no, you know what, let's hold on, we think this can be a 5x in another couple of years. So that's another difference.
Hey, those are great points, and I think we've conclusively resolved here that family office investors are great people to know, although we're not kinder and gentler. So I want to destroy that myth. We're not kinder and gentler. But they're good people to know, and one thing Ben said is really a good one, is if you have a project and you're raising capital for it, a good family office anchor can help fill out your group for you. And we're not bankers, we're not doing it for a fee, we're just doing it on the, what goes around, goes around, comes around, and all that stuff. So, anyway, so we've concluded that family office investors are great. How would people acting in this investment community get to meet more family office investors? Anyone want to take that on?
Well, attending
Brian,
this
okay.
panel is one way.
I don't know that I have a good answer for that. It's just general. It's general.
It's just networking.
connections.
You
It's
can't.
all connections,
You're not.
yeah.
You're not going to be cold calling them. You're going to be, doing what all of you guys already do, which is going to conferences, attending these types of things, and trying to develop relationships. My advice would be to do it initially without selling anything. Just go and try to meet people and say, hey, similar to what Brian described, well, let's sit down and have a cup of coffee. I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'd love to hear about what you're doing, rather than, hey, I've got a great deal for you.
Agree. I mean, actually, we used Sapient because we met them at a conference 2 years ago. And we just had a good conversation. There was no selling going on, good people. Hate to say it, your business is a little commoditized, whatever. So, what's the differentiating factor? We liked the people we met. We said, we'll give them a try. We've never worked with them before. We worked with them, we liked them. But they didn't sell us at the cocktail party.
Excellent.
And this is, I feel like, sort of endemic to our industry, which finance. It's a trust business, right? And this is true especially for family offices, where there is generally a little more privacy involved, and just other issues that can sort of come into the process. But you're trying to build trust with people, and oftentimes with people that you've never met before. How would you go about doing that? Is sending an email with a deal the best way to build trust? If it is, you should plan on being the best email writer that the world has ever seen, right? If it's to casually meet somebody here at this venue and then catch up, without even pitching a deal at some point in the future, and maybe you see each other at another event, and who knows, then you have a live one, right? And now there's a little bit of water under the bridge, and both parties are able to discuss it more openly. And that totally makes sense.
Totally makes sense, and if you can find some common thing to talk about, whether it's a hobby or such, or I might invite somebody to play golf or such like that, and just a way to get to know people. I might invite a banker to play golf, and let's get to know each other a little bit. No selling during that process. Another way to expand the network is to be successful with a family office, because family offices do talk, and they're eager to help their brethren. So if we've been in some good things, that would say, yeah, that fund's really good, or that manager's really good, you should go talk to them. And that does happen, and it happens every day. So that's another way of expanding your contacts in family office investing. So we're doing on time. We perhaps take a few questions from the floor. Any comments on Robert?
I guess the one thing, and this kind of goes back to my trust building comment, the one thing that I would certainly suggest to everybody here as you're reaching out to family offices, or really anybody when you're trying to pitch a deal, is visualize this room full of people next time you were sending out that email, right? And what do I mean by that is visualize that there are 50 people just here in West LA who are all emailing people like us deals or opportunities or whatever it might be. And then be sympathetic to the person who's receiving that, what they're going through and what they're trying to decide. And so where am I going with this? Really think hard about how your opportunity and or you specifically are unique and different than the other people in the room. Not good or bad relative to other people, just different, right? And the analogy I will use for this is if you think of like college entrance essays, maybe a few years back for everybody. Remember, everybody tells you when you're writing college entrance essays to write the true story of you, right? But if any of you are like me, you don't do that, right? You write the essay that you think everybody wants to hear. Well, what happens when you write that is the admissions officer gets 100 essays that all sound exactly the same, right? And so when you're sending deal pitches to all of us, don't write what you think we want to hear, because you won't differentiate, right? You only need one person to accept, so you want to come up with the real you, right? The real articulation of what it is you think you have found and why you think it's special. And this panel, like, you'll probably get 4 no's out of 4, who knows? But like, if we extend this panel to 100 people, you might get 5 yeses, right? And that's a pretty good hit rate. 1 out of 20, right? Like, pretty good hit rate.
I think the point of investing the time to get to know specifically what people want is really useful. People that I've invested the time too, and say this is the things we like, this is what we don't like. And so when a banker or somebody in the venture industry contacts me, they know what I already want. Okay, Gary's a big data junkie, so we'll send him everything with big data, and he won't do biotech. So if I see a biotech from a guy or a woman that I've spent an hour with, and I get a biotech deal the next day, then I'm not happy. Agreed. I think we've reached our allotted time. I hope this was useful for everybody. I'd like you to join with me in thanking the